Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in just a minute. I'm just doing the live on YouTube.
Okay, I'm back.
That's great. So I just started the webinar and started the YouTube live, and we have people joining in right now. So we'll start in just a minute.
Okay.
Still have people joining us. All right. Oops. Marjorie, sorry, Maurice, you're back in the same link. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Ravina Nimbalkar, and I'm the Executive Director at NAMI Santa Clara County. I'm just going to go over the NAMI Santa Clara County updates before I introduce our speaker for tonight. So all our programs have been virtual since shelter in place in March of last year, and our warm line is up and running from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday via phone as well as email. And our after-hour family support is still available on evenings and weekends. Our support groups are all listed on our website, www.namisantaclara.org, and offered over Zoom. For all the educational classes, such as family to family, familiar to familiar, persona to persona, peer to peer, provided in class, you can contact our warm line number, which is 408-453 0400 and select option number 1 for further details. The peer-to-peer next class is going to be in January, and so is the family-to-family class. The provider class as well in January of 2022. The NAMI Basics is on demand and on our website, and you can take it at your own pace. Same with the home front, which is online. The next FaithNet training is on Thursday, December 9th at 11 a.m. And if you want more details, you can always call our warm line number. For our community peer program, we continue to do matches by hospitals as well as self-referrals. Also, I do encourage you to please check our website. Again, it's www.namisantaclara.org. We update our blog section every month with a new article written by Maureen Milo. And our NAMI Walks Your Way Silicon Valley was it was on October 9th, that is last month. It's been a month, today is November 9th. So we're really excited to announce that we have raised over $268,000. Our goal was $230,000. So we're really excited about this. But our fundraiser is still open until December 8th. So you can still continue to fundraise through your teams or individually as well. I do want to mention that NAMI Walks is our biggest fundraiser, and 100% of the funds raised go towards our programs. So thank you so much for all your support to all the teams and the people who walked and participated, all the sponsors. And if you have any pictures, do share with us. You can use hashtag NAMIWalksSV. And if you are interested in seeing a program, the virtual program that we had, it's available on our YouTube channel, which is NAMI Santa Clara County, or you can even go to our NAMI Walks website, which is www.namiwalks.org/Silicon Valley. Our chairperson for this walk this year was Senator Dave Christie, Congressman Ro Khanna, and Dr. Sarah Cody, and our keynote speaker for the walk was San Francisco 49ers offensive lineman Laken Tomlinson. So you can hear all the speeches on the website or on our YouTube channel. Okay, so now it's time for me to introduce our speaker for tonight. Our speaker is Marjorie Baldwin. The topic that she's going to speak on is living and working with a serious mental illness. So Marjorie is a professor in the Department of Economics at the W.P. Curry School of Business, Arizona State University. She's a health economist with an international reputation for her research on employment discrimination against workers with disabilities, in particular workers with mental disorders, and for her research on cause and outcomes of work-related injuries. Professor Baldwin is a member of the National Academy of Social Insurance, the American Society of Health Economists, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and serves on the National Advisory Mental Health Council for NIMH. So over to you, Professor Baldwin, and you can share your PowerPoint presentation and let me know if you have any questions.
Yes, are you seeing this okay?
It just started sharing.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you, Ravina, and thank you for the invitation to speak to your group. Sounds like you have a really active chapter and so much going on, and that's just great to hear. So let me begin by introducing my two hats that I wear tonight. And the first is the hat of a parent. My son was diagnosed with schizophrenia in 1999 during his junior year in college. I had noticed strange behavior for probably about 6 months to maybe even a year before he was actually diagnosed. But I didn't ever think of mental illness. I thought he was taking drugs, and I think that's what most parents would suspect. We're all cued into thinking that, knowing that drugs are a danger, but not so much to the signs and symptoms of mental illness. So I was really at sea. I remember thinking that I had raised my kids consulting with Dr. Spock, but Dr. Spock stops at about the teenagers and definitely doesn't go as far as mental illness. Shortly after my son was diagnosed, my husband and I joined a NAMI family-to-family group, and it was a blessing. Just to know that there were others who could relate to what we were going through. The information they provided was wonderful. I remember towards the end of the sessions, they said, you are going to move from your position now where you're dealing with the acute signs of mental illness in your loved one to eventually becoming an advocate for people with mental illness. And I remember thinking, not me, I just want to take care of my son. Being an advocate would be too much for me. But I find now, 20 years later, that yes, perhaps I have taken on the hat of an advocate as well. And I was uniquely positioned to do that because I was trained as a health economist. And my research, even before my son was diagnosed, was studying discrimination against persons with disabilities in the labor market, trying to estimate how much of their disadvantage in wages and disadvantage in employment rates could be attributed to discrimination. After my son's diagnosis, it was pretty natural for me to focus on discrimination against workers with mental illness. And when I did, I realized that this group has some of the poorest outcomes in the labor market, not only when compared to people without disabilities, but also when compared to people with other types of disabilities. And one of the big issues that they face is the tremendous stigma against mental illness. So that when they want to enter the job market, they encounter a dilemma. Should they tell their employer about their mental illness? Should they disclose it? Or should they not? One of the advantages of disclosure is that your employer knows about your mental illness and you can request reasonable accommodations under the Americans with Disabilities Act. But the danger is that disclosing will trigger stigma and discrimination if your employer believes in some of the negative stereotypes of mental illness. In 2017, I and some of my colleagues received a grant from the National Institute of Mental Health to study factors that influence the disclosure decision and the resulting work outcomes for workers with serious mental illness employed in competitive jobs. And this is going to be a theme throughout what I'm talking about tonight. So let me be clear, by a competitive job, we mean a job that is not set aside for persons with disabilities, that pays at least the minimum wage, and that was not obtained with the help of mental health services. So we're not talking about supported employment jobs here. So what I'd like to do in my talk this evening is discuss the stigma that places workers with mental illness at such a disadvantage. It's a deterrent to disclosing at work, and it's a driver of discrimination. It affects people with serious mental illness and their families as well, as my guess is many of you know. So what I'd like to do is draw on my experiences with my son and tell you some of my journey as a parent, and then bring in what we've discovered from our research to address these stereotypes and to talk about why they should not dictate the lives of people with serious mental illness. So again, the source of stigma and discrimination is negative stereotypes of persons with mental illness. And some of the most common ones are that people with mental illness are dangerous, that they're responsible for their illness, that they're incompetent, that mental illness is hopeless. They will never recover, they will never get better. So for each of these stereotypes, as I said, I'm going to talk a little bit about my own experiences as a parent, and then I'm going to talk about the research and just the facts associated with each stereotype. Let me begin with one of the most profound stereotypes, and that is that people with mental illness are dangerous. When my son was diagnosed with with schizophrenia, I heard about it from one of his friends at college. My son had been talking about suicide. His friends were frightened and they called the police. The police took him to the University Medical Center, and his friend told us that that's where we could see him. So naturally, my husband and I immediately got in the car, drove the 2 hours to where he was going to school, and went immediately to the emergency room. Of course, the first person that I saw was not a doctor. The first person that I saw was someone from admissions, and they wanted to see the insurance card that showed that David was covered with my health insurance. The second person that I saw was also not a doctor. The second person that I saw was someone from the college student services, and that person had papers with them. And these papers were to withdraw David from school immediately due to his illness. At the time, I thought, how nice of them to have all this paperwork done. All I had to do was sign, and he was withdrawn from school. What I did not realize at the time is that would be not so nice and not so easy to get him readmitted. In fact, he left school in the spring semester, and fortunately for him and for us, he was very responsive to the medication, and he wanted to return to school that fall. His doctor approved him going back to school part-time, taking a lighter course load than wouldn't be normal. And so we began the readmissions process. This time, it was not just signing some paperwork. This time, the dean of students demanded that David go before a hearing of faculty to determine if he should be readmitted. The hearing consisted of the dean of students, a number of faculty, and lasted for 2 to 3 hours. David was in the meeting the whole time. He could ask people to testify or give statements on his behalf. And his doctor came and told them about his recovery and his progress, and that his symptoms were under control, and that she felt it was important for him to return to school part-time. His case manager said the same thing. And David also asked his father and myself to make statements. When it came to my turn, I said to them, if you would like, we can talk about my son's rights under federal laws for education and employment of people with disabilities under the Americans with Disability Act. I said, I've done plenty of research on the subject, and I brought reprints of my articles. And with that, I spread the articles in front of them. I said, but I'd rather not talk about his rights. I'd rather talk about why he deserves to be back in school. And in fact, up until the time he got sick, he had never been in, had any disciplinary action. He had a decent GPA and he was doing fine in school. So with the hearing over, we left. David and his father went off to get something to eat. I was back in his apartment. Within 30 minutes, the phone call came and they said, we've approved David to come back to school part-time, but he cannot live on campus. I didn't contest that because I didn't want him to live on campus anyway. I wanted him in an apartment where I could visit and keep my eye on him. But I know why they didn't want him on campus. It's because they buy into the stereotype of people with mental illness as dangerous. And at the time, there were a number of incidents in the news about students and shootings. And so I understood what was going on. I was hurt, I was angry, but we proceeded and David went back to school. What does the research say about education and discrimination? Well, in fact, education is important for everyone in the labor market. You're more likely to be employed, more likely to have higher earnings, the more education that you have. But it's even more important for people with disabilities because education increases their value in the labor market. In a sense, it replaces some of what we call human capital that they've lost through the disability. They can gain back some human capital in a different form through education. It provides some protection against discrimination in the labor market. People with disabilities who have higher education are more likely to be employed and more likely to have higher earnings. The sad fact is that some of the common types of mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, often strike a person just at the age when they're in college, just as happened with my son. And in fact, statistics show that students with serious mental illness are far more likely to drop out of college than other students. But remember this, education is so important. If you're the parent or the spouse of someone whose education has been interrupted by mental illness and they want to return to school, do whatever you can to advocate for them, to support them, because it could make a tremendous difference in their lives. And what are the facts about this stereotype that people with mental illness are dangerous? Well, in fact, persons with serious mental illness whose symptoms are in remission or controlled by medications are no more likely than others to be dangerous. That is, if they're not experiencing acute symptoms of their illness. The risk of violence is increased by acute psychosis, but still, the vast majority of violent crimes, somewhere approaching 99%, are not committed by persons with serious mental illness. And in fact, statistics show that males aged 15 to 24 are more likely to commit acts of violence than persons with SMI, 17% versus 12%. So maybe what the colleges and universities should be careful about is the males on their campus, just as much as anyone who's diagnosed with serious mental illness. More facts. Persons with serious mental illness are more likely to be victims of violent crime than to be perpetrators. The victimization rates for persons with schizophrenia are 12 times higher than the normal rate. And in fact, most people with serious mental illness are more dangerous to themselves than others. I'm sure all of you know the statistics on suicide rates among people with mental illness. Let me pause here. Ravina, am I loud enough? Is it coming through, or am I speaking too fast, too slow?
No, that's fine. It's perfect.
Okay, then we will carry on. The second stereotype I wanted to talk about was this idea that people with mental illness are responsible for their illness. That is, they are to blame. When we were preparing to have David readmitted to school, I didn't know what process it was, but I know that universities have disability services offices. And so I called the office at his university to ask about help with readmission. And the disability services counselor I got said, well, I told him that his doctor had approved David to go back to school part-time. The counselor said, well, if he's not ready to go to school full-time, he shouldn't be returning to school. And so I reiterated, his doctor has approved him to go back part-time. And the counselor said, well, when your son got in trouble, and I stopped him right there. I said, my son did not get in trouble. My son got sick. Needless to say, I did not consult the Disability Services Office ever again. And I was frankly appalled that people who are working in disability services should buy into this attitude that mental illness is something that people should be blamed for. In fact, having a son with schizophrenia gave me a whole different perspective on people who are homeless. I remember attending conferences in major cities and walking to the conference hotel past homeless people who were sleeping in the streets or begging in the streets and thinking, why don't they just get up and get a job? But after my son got sick and I started doing more research on the subject, I realized how many people among the homeless are actually suffering from serious mental illness. I was at another conference in Washington, D.C., and I was walking to a meeting with a colleague who was a vice president in a major company. And we stopped at a corner to wait for the signal to cross. And the man who was standing next to me had a whole plastic bag of belongings over his shoulder. And he was talking to a person that wasn't there. And he was talking in words and sentences, words that I understood, but sentences that didn't make sense. And I knew what that was about because I had heard my son do that when he was acutely ill. My colleague, who also heard the man, walked to the side of me to stand in between me and the homeless person. And he said, you shouldn't be next to that. And I thought, that could be my son. It gives you a whole new outlook. In fact, one of the sad things is that some people without mental illness buy into this stereotype that they are responsible for their illness. We've done some research on self-stigma, is what it's called. And by self-stigma, we mean this tendency for people with mental illness to adopt the stereotypes of mental illness as describing themselves, as correct with regard to themselves. And so when you see some people with serious mental illness blame themselves for their illness. In our research, we asked people to respond to questions and to say, do you agree or disagree with these statements? And many of our respondents agreed with the statements. I'm embarrassed or ashamed that I have a mental illness, or I am disappointed in myself for having a mental illness. Can you imagine thinking about that with a physical illness? I'm embarrassed that I got pneumonia. I'm disappointed in myself for having pneumonia. Doesn't make any sense. But this is very common the way other people think about people with mental illness, and often the way they think about themselves. Well, what are the facts? Severe mental illnesses are biological brain disorders that interfere with normal brain chemistry. Researchers have done scans of people's brains, people who are suffering with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and they can see the differences from normal brain activity. The medications that are effective in controlling the acute symptoms of mental illness for many people address these chemical imbalances in the brain. The take-home message is mental illness is no one's fault. It's not the parent's fault. It's not the individual's fault. They are not responsible. Next stereotype, the stereotype of incompetence. David was diagnosed in 1999. He graduated from college in 2001, and he did manage to get a job. He was living on his own. My husband and I, he was doing so well, my husband and I moved to Arizona. But in a year or so, he stopped taking his meds. He had a serious relapse. He was, his life fell apart. He quit his job. He had crazy ideas about new jobs that he was going to do. He racked up bills on his credit cards. He was paranoid about his roommates, that they were out to get him. His roommates notified my husband and I. I went to where he was living in Charlotte, North Carolina, took him to the doctor, tried to persuade him to get back on his medications. He couldn't do anything. I took him to mental health services, and they said there was nothing that they could do. So we went back home. I and left him in Charlotte. I called the police. There was nothing that they could do. I called social services, told them that he was disintegrating and that he was going to be unable to care for himself. They sent a person to stop by, but they said there was nothing they could do. And so we waited and worried. Finally, he had an altercation with a roommate. They had a fist fight, and his roommate pressed charges, and David wound up in jail. We got a recommendation, a reference to a disabilities, a lawyer who specialized in defending people with mental illness in the judicial system. And he went to see David, and he called us and he said he has a hearing tomorrow, and I'm sure that he will be released. Well, in fact, he was not released. The judge decided that he was too sick to be released from jail. Not sick enough to get into a hospital, but too sick to be released from jail. So we flew back to Charlotte and we bailed him out of jail. And now we had some leverage and persuaded him to come to Arizona and to live with us. And we prepared to put his life back together for the second or third time. One good thing about Arizona is that all people with mental illness are eligible for the Arizona Medicaid program just through their diagnosis of serious mental illness. So he could get health insurance through Medicaid, and he, through what was called value options at the time. He had a psychiatrist and a case manager appointed to him. I was exhausted, frankly, and I didn't know if I had the will or the wherewithal to help him rebuild his life. I went with him to see his case manager, and I told him, her just how I felt. I said he needs a job, he needs health insurance, he's broke, he's behind in his car payments, and we just need help. And she said, well, we have an employment services coordinator who helps the people who are our clients get jobs. And I thought, wonderful, somebody to help us. So we scheduled an employment meeting with this employment services coordinator. She was a very nice old lady, reminded me of my grandmother. And she said, well, I have a job. He could collect coins from vending machines. And I thought, is this why we worked so hard, so he could get a college degree? Again, this idea that this was all that a person with serious mental illness was likely to be capable of. Well, my research shows that this is wrong. Many persons with even the most serious mental illnesses are working in well-paid competitive jobs. For this grant project that I have done that is sponsored by the National Institute of Mental Health, over the last 4 years, we have surveyed more than 800 workers with schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, major depressive disorder, working in competitive jobs after onset of their mental illness. In this sample, the workers have mean wages greater than $20 per hour. The median, 50% of them have been working 3 years or longer in their current jobs. Their occupations include accountants, bakers, cashiers, data analysts, lawyers, managers, nurses, restaurant workers, sales associates, teachers. In short, the whole gamut of occupations. Now, I'm not saying that every person who has a serious mental illness may be capable of competitive employment, but people who are responsive to their medications, people who are in remission, many of them can work and want to work. What are the facts? Even though these persons have residual functional limitations, many of these persons who are in our survey have residual functional limitations, even if their most acute symptoms are under control. They report to us that they have some cognitive limitations, memory losses, organizational difficulties. They have some emotional limitations. They are sensitive to stress. They sometimes have trouble controlling their emotions. They may have relational limitations, difficulty communicating with other people, difficulty working around other people, but it doesn't mean that they can't work. Persons with mental illness can experience long periods of remission and recovery, and they can be productive members of society. Work is important. It's a sign of recovery. It's a source of self-esteem. It adds structure to life. When David was first discharged from the hospital, when he was first diagnosed with schizophrenia, his doctor told him, "You can recover from this." He told me many years later, I held on to those words for my life. There are other stories of people whose doctors and mental health providers have not been so encouraging. I remember reading about one person with mental illness who was in recovery and who wanted to become a computer programmer. And his health provider said, "Oh, you'll never be able to do that, not with this disease." It's important to give people with mental illness messages of encouragement and hope, and messages that build on their strengths instead of always concentrating on their limitations. So that brings me to the stereotype of mental illness being hopeless. This is a stereotype that persons with serious mental illness will never get better. They will never have a life. They will never recover. And I think that after my son was diagnosed and in the periods when he was so sick, this was what I grieved for most. I grieved for the son I had lost, for the life that he would never have. I never expected that he would marry or that I would have grandchildren from him. But as I said before, David had a different perception, rooted in what his doctor said: "You can recover from this." And he said, I held on to those words for my life. But the general public does not really buy into this. In a UK study, huge percentages of the public felt that people with schizophrenia will not improve even with treatment, and 40% believe that patients with schizophrenia could never recover. Sometimes these negative messages come from providers of mental services with mental illness, as I talked about. Sometimes the messages come from the research community. When I was beginning to do research for my book, I discovered that most of the research on employment for people with serious mental illness comes from what I call the supported employment literature. Supported employment are programs run by mental health services that help place persons with mental illness, sometimes in jobs set aside for people with disabilities, sometimes in competitive jobs, and they offer them supports. Perhaps they have a job coach. Perhaps they have a person that they can call if they need assistance. Perhaps they have someone who intercedes with their employer on their behalf. In the research, supported employment is considered to be the gold standard for employment of persons with serious mental illness. One of the planks, or one of the provisions for supported employment, is that the participants are counseled on how to make sure that they never earn enough to get off disability benefits. That is, that they never exceed their earnings threshold for Social Security disability insurance. I realize that for many people with serious mental illness who are not so responsive to the medications, who are not experiencing remission of their symptoms, those disability benefits are a lifeline. And the supported employment are wonderful programs for those people. But it's wrong to assume that every person with schizophrenia or a serious mental illness has to be on disability benefits for the rest of their life. And so I was dismayed that there wasn't any research on people with serious mental illness who were working and supporting themselves in competitive jobs. And that was one thing I set out to do with my research study and in my book. Well, how did David find his way back from that low point when he came back to live with us? And I remember, I'll tell you a story about his 30th birthday. I guess that probably was the low point for both of us. He was living with us. We took him out to dinner. His father and I were his only social life. I would invite him to go to parties that we had been invited to. He knew some of the people, but he would not go. He said, "I have nothing to talk about. I have no job." And on his 30th birthday, he opened his presents and then he burst into tears and he said, "Mom, don't ever celebrate my birthday again. I've got nothing in life. I'm 30 years old. I have no family. I have no money. I have no job." And I just sat there and cried with him. At age 31, he was still living with us. He still had no job. And I didn't know what to do about his birthday. Obviously, he'd asked for no more birthdays, but I couldn't just let that day go by. So I came up with the idea of celebrating an unbirthday. So I bought him some presents, but I left them unwrapped. And I said, "David, these are unwrapped presents for your unbirthday." I baked him a cake, but I left it unfrosted. And I said, "David, it's an unfrosted cake for your unbirthday." And this year he laughed. And shortly after that, he started to find his way back. How did that happen? He tells the story this way. He was at his mental health services visiting his case manager. And when he went in, he saw a Black woman there, and she had 3 or 4 children around. And he said to her, "You have a lovely family." She went in to see the counselor, and then he went in to see his counselor. When he went out, when he left the counselor, she was waiting for him outside, and she said, "Young man, you're possessed. You've got demons. You need to go to church." He said, "Well, where should I go?" And she pointed to a church across the street. It was Phoenix First Assembly at the time. It's now the Dream City Church. She said, "You should go there." He said, "I can't. I live on the other side of town." And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Phoenix, but I think maybe cities in California are the same way. They are sprawling. And so to live on the other side of town was like 150 blocks away. But my husband and I eventually divorced, and he went to live with his father. And when he did, he was very close to the church, and he started going to church there. And he became involved in some of their ministries. One of their ministries is the Phoenix Dream Center. The Dream Center takes in people who are homeless, people with mental illness, people who are being released from jail and should not go back to their families or have no families to go back to, takes in people who've been victims of human trafficking, takes in young unwed mothers, and introduces them to God and helps them rebuild their lives. David became involved in the ministries of the Dream Center. He was given a volunteer position to work with their young men's ministry, and eventually it turned into a paid job. I remember going to church with David one morning, and he introduced me to the pastor, Tommy Barnett. He's kind of well known across the country as an evangelist, and he has spoken internationally. And when I met him, I thanked him for everything he had done, and he said, "We just love your son." I just felt, at last, there's someone else to help with the burden, someone else that's there to support us. When David began working at the Dream Center, he invited me down so I could see his office, and he showed me his desk, and he had an assistant and showed me her desk. And it was like almost like he was in first grade again, and he was showing me, "This is my desk, Mom, this is my place." It meant that much to him to have a job and to be paid for it. After a couple of years, he left the job and started his own business as a handyman. He has since married. He has 3 children, ages 5 and 3 and 5 months. When he married, when he was planning the wedding ceremony, he asked me, "Mom, what music do you want to dance to for the mother and son dance?" And I knew right away to dream the impossible dream, because to me, this was an impossible dream, that he would actually have a life. He has stopped taking his medications around 2010. He did not stop abruptly. He had learned that lesson several times before. When he had gone off his medications abruptly, he landed up in the hospital, or he landed up in jail. He talked to a psychiatrist and said he didn't want to be on the meds all his life. He wanted to try to get off the meds. And so together they worked to wean David off the medications very gradually. So they dropped the amount he was taking, and he tried that for 6 months. And when there was no recurrence, they dropped it again. And eventually he stopped taking medications. Did I approve? Nope. And when he started, he didn't tell me because he knew I would disapprove. And for years and years, I watched and waited for the symptoms to recur, because I guess part of me believed the stereotype that people cannot recover from these illnesses. But his oldest son is 5 years old, and he's doing well with his business, and he's doing well as a dad. And I've almost stopped worrying. And I just want you to know that David's not the only one. This is some statistics about the people that we have in our survey. 12% of them have schizophrenia, 44% were diagnosed with bipolar, and 45% with major depressive disorder. 82% told us that they have a mental health provider. 47% had 4 or more visits with their health provider in the previous year. 78% of them have a prescription for medication, but 25% told us that they're not taking their medications at all. And so David's not the only one. It's a minority, but there are some people who actually do recover and do get off the meds. But also, I want to emphasize that 75% of the people in our study, these people who are working, who have some well-paid, high-level jobs, still need medications to control their symptoms. So it's possible without medications for some people, and it's possible with medications for even more people. There's also research supporting this idea that not all patients need antipsychotic treatment continuously throughout their lifetime. This is a study that was published in Psychological Medicine. A total of 139 psychotic patients were studied in this Chicago follow-up study. 70 patients with schizophrenia syndromes and 69 with mood disorders. So that would be bipolar with psychotic affect. They were assessed prospectively at the acute case, and then they were followed up 6 times over the next 20 years. So kind of an amazing study to have that follow-up. At each follow-up, 30 to 40% of the schizophrenia patients were no longer on antipsychotics, not necessarily the same people at each follow-up. This patients who were not on antipsychotics for prolonged periods were significantly less likely to be psychotic and experienced more periods of recovery. They also had more favorable risk and protective factors. Those that were off their antipsychotics for prolonged periods did not relapse more frequently. I think that patients may know, and if they're working with their psychiatrist, they may do what David did, try to withdraw from the medications gradually. For some people it works, and for some people it doesn't. So I do not want anyone to think that I'm advocating for people to go off their meds. No. I believe those medications saved David's life and helped him rebuild his life. And I feel very blessed that somehow there's this miracle that he was able to get off the medications, but there are other people like that. And I think with that, I will stop sharing. And I don't even know how long I've talked. So Rena, I hope it hasn't gone too long. I hope I've left enough time.
No, this is good. I think if you are done with the PowerPoint, then we can open it up to questions. I do see some questions, and I know that a couple of people had also raised their hands. So I can just look at that. Okay, I have 3 people who've raised their hands. So let's start.
So is Nadine going to, yeah, there she is.
Hi.
Hi, Nadine.
I'm Nadine, and I really can't think of a question. I do have a son with, he's been re-diagnosed. It was schizophrenia, and then later on, after another hospitalization, it was schizoaffective, which is the bipolar with the schizophrenia. And he is on medications. He is in his elderly years now, now that he's over a certain age in Santa Clara County, he got aspirational pneumonia and was hospitalized. And they upped his medicine then that the regular doctor was giving him. The doctors in the hospital did, and that seemed to help him. But his Boyden care home closed, and then after it was closed, we tried to get him into another one, and there's only 5 of them for his age group in all of Santa Clara County, and they're all full. And the waiting lists are all full. So he's been home with me since 2019, and that's but he's okay. He's peaceful, and he takes his meds, and he actually helps me here and then. But he still needs his meds. There's times when I know he needs his meds, and he's doing well. But I'm just sorry that there isn't more out there for people over this age group. The ones that were available, we put in for a supplemental. They're like $3,000 a month, and he's getting $900 a month, Social Security. So this one lady at one of the group homes put in for him to get what they call supplemental. And so she went through the paperwork, which the doctor had to sign. And the doctor put that he likes to mow lawns and do other things, and they denied us. So back to zero again.
Yeah.
And so, but he's fine. And he's sitting here right now listening to me talk. So with that, I'll let somebody else talk.
God bless you and God bless him. And you give me what I have seen from the beginning end of when a person is young, is that there's huge gaps in the mental health services system, and that it's the parents and the families that have to fill in these gaps. And now you're saying, even at the other end of the life cycle, there's still these same gaps, and parents and families have to fill in. And what more can I say? Mental health services system has failed me along the way, and I'm sorry that it's failing you. And I hope you find some support.
Thank you so much for your speech tonight. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, so I think we have Victoria.
Hi, Victoria. Make sure you unmute.
Hi. I thank you so much for everything, Marjorie. I really appreciate hearing your experience. I didn't have a specific question. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, I think we have Subramanian Ganeshan asked to. Here we go. Ganeshan, can you hear us?
Oh, he's on mute. You have to unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. You're going in and out. We can't.
Yeah. Yeah, you're unmuted right now if you want to ask the question.
Must be a problem with his connection.
Yeah. Okay, maybe I can go to the next one then.
Maybe we can come back.
Yeah.
Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Marjorie. Can you hear me?
Yes. Loud and clear.
I completely resonate with David's story. I was going to college down in Southern California, and I lost it. And I was studying economics and accounting. And my my friends said I wasn't acting right, and you know, I was just losing it. And that was the same time frame too, which is amazing. 99 is when
Oh, okay.
same time frame. So it's amazing. It's funny you hear somebody else's story in my story, I at this point in my life, I'm 43 now, and I feel depressed. I live with my parents still, and I'm on SSDI, the SSDI Medicare package, and I feel like I'm falling through the cracks because I have so much to offer, but at the same time, I've been discriminated against severely because of my mental illness, and I'm not playing the victim card. When I first was undiagnosed, I tried to live on my own. I crashed. I ended up in the hospital, but I'm on medication, and the medication is keeping me stabilized. And I stay busy. I go lift weights. I'm active. I run. I walk. I just want to get. I just don't want. What it boils down to is that I'm 43 years old, and I just don't want to fall through the cracks. I have a lot to offer, and I don't want to be on the SSDI forever. But it's kind of a crux.
Have you ever tried volunteering?
Volunteer? Yeah. Well, I haven't tried volunteering. I know there's quite a bit of resources in Santa Clara County where you can actually volunteer. So I know there's a website called volunteermatch.org, and that might be a segue into employment.
That might be a pathway.
Okay.
For David, it was wonderful because when you're volunteering, you can have flexibility in your hours and so forth. And, he did not go back and work 40 hours a week right away.
Yeah.
He was working a couple days a week. So that might be a pathway for you.
Okay.
I'll tell you an interesting story about he was on SSDI. And when he started his business, he waited several months, and he was making enough money, and he wrote to SSDI and said, "You can take me off benefits now because I'm making enough."
Yeah.
And he got a response from them in a letter, and they said, "Well, we're sorry, but you're not eligible to withdraw from SSDI right now." And I said to him, "David, you hold on to that letter, because in 6 months they might come back to you and say, we want this money back."
Yeah.
But what he did, we worked longer, and in 6 months he wrote another letter, and he said, "I've been earning this much. I've been supporting myself." And he was able to get off SSDI. So perhaps volunteer work will be a pathway for you, but people with serious mental illness have much to offer. And so I'm glad you believe in yourself, and I hope you find your niche.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you for the seminar. It was wonderful. A lot of good information.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Adrian. Do we have Heidi?
Hello, Heidi. You have to unmute. There she is.
Is that okay now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes, I really enjoyed the seminar. Thank you for sharing. I was wondering, when you're doing an application for a job, are you required to say you have a mental illness? Or what do you recommend? Because I know my son is, starting to recover and do well. And I'm just wondering, when you ask that question on an application, what you recommend doing.
Good question. Because I had that question myself when he first graduated. The first job that he got, he worked for an apartment complex, renting apartments. And when he filled out the job application, he called me. He was in Charlotte, and I was living in the eastern part of North Carolina. And he said, "Mom, this application asks if you have, and I don't remember if you have a serious health condition. I don't remember if it was mental illness or physical condition." And I wrestled with what to say to him, because if he put that he had a mental illness, they were not going to hire him. And what was I going to do? Was I going to tell him to lie. So I said, David, I don't know. Let me think about this. I'll get back to you. I talked to my brother. And in fact, it is illegal to ask that question in a job interview or on a job application. But again, if he wrote in, this is illegal to ask me that, they're just not going to hire him.
Yeah.
So I talked with my brother and he said, look, the Americans with Disabilities Act has been in place, for more than a decade. Clearly, this employer knows that they're not supposed to ask if you have a disability. So what they must mean is, do you have a health condition that would prevent you from doing this job? Because that is legal to ask. And so my brother said he should answer no because he's able to do the job. And so that's what we did. And that's my recommendation. They must, it's illegal to ask. So they must be asking if he has a health condition that limits his ability to do that job. And he can say no.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, but it's interesting that you're still finding applications with that question because they're not supposed to ask.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And I wish him good luck.
Thank you.
Work is so important.
Thank you.
I'm glad he's doing well. And
well, he's actually right now going to school, and then he started to then he got into a funk and withdrew from school and took an incomplete and then he talked to the instructor. So he's finishing his English class now. So, he's working through this little, this setbacks and stuff. And so I hope he continues because I think it'll be very rewarding for him. But I don't think he has I think he would feel better if he knew like what he was working towards exactly. I think he's kind of feeling like, well, I'm kind of a little, this is going to take me 10 years to get my degree with only taking 2 classes. And, so he gets discouraged and then he gets encouraged and then he gets discouraged and just the roller coaster.
And it's a roller coaster for you too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, just as I said before, keep encouraging him. That education is going to make a difference in his life, huge difference. Like David said, when he got his degree, they can never take that away from me, Mom. So that's important. And maybe he needs to, take a couple courses a semester and have a part-time job or whatever to keep his foot in working or to volunteer,
Mm-hmm.
or even do an internship if he can get that through his through the university, if they can help him with that.
Mm-hmm.
But good luck. And I'm sorry to tell you, it took David over 10 years. It doesn't come fast in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good luck.
Yep.
God bless you.
Thank you so much, Heidi. I think we have Ganeshan again. Let's see.
Okay, you need to unmute Ganeshan, and hopefully we can hear you this time.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. Maybe I didn't click the allow button. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. The lecture was very good. Thank you, Professor. Very informative. I just wanted to ask a few questions. You mentioned David, started this in 1999. Then by 2010, he was off the meds, right? Medication with the psychiatrist help. So was there, like a gradual decrease in medication? Because my son is almost now, from 2016, so almost 5-6 years he has been taking medication, and he was on and off in the job, out of 10 years after he graduated from college, he worked almost 7.5 years, but 2 years, he had to be because of that illness. So he has it's so effective. They say his medications are helping, but right now it's not working. But we think that maybe the medication, it's probably too much. I don't know. As a parent, we always feel that way, but he's doing fine. So I'm wondering, whether in David's case, right, did he stop the medication over a long period of time or within a short time? And now he says from 2010 he didn't take any medication at all. That's really an excellent sign. When you go online, people say all kinds of information. Some of them are misinformation, I would say. But I don't know. So can you give me some information in that along the
So
lines?
before he finally went off his medication, but he had tried to just stopping his medication at least 3 times that I know of. And when he just stopped taking the meds, his symptoms returned as flagrant as they were when he first got sick. So he kind of learned his lesson, and he told the psychiatrist that he knew that he couldn't just stop taking the meds, but he would like to wean himself off them. And it took at least a year, because I think he saw a psychiatrist every 3 months, and they just reduced the dosage a little bit each time. And he continued to still see his mental health provider after he got off the meds. When he was going through this process, I noticed one time when he started to be relapsing, but he was under a lot of stress. The stress was relieved from his life, and then he seemed to get back on track. But it did take a long time.
Yeah, my son last year, he, stopped for almost 6 months, he didn't even eat for, then, something relapse came. So we have to take him to the hospital. And when we call 911, right, they come and all. I feel bad about it, but, something happened at home. But we wanted to save him, so sometimes, police came and, they don't have the right protocol. We tell them, hey, we just want to take him to hospital, but they don't have the right protocol. They just come here and they don't understand, for some reason, the 911 police department don't have a good, understanding of what it is all about. I hope this 922, the new number, the government has now approved, will help, at least there will be people who knows what the issues are and then try to, it's a matter of, half an hour, to calm them down, right? That's all it is. But then sometimes they go through, all kinds of, what it is really, for parents very hard to see such things, So, but I hope, and also one more thing is, really very important, how to get them back into, the job market, right? My son's case, he did out of 10 years, 7.5 years he worked. One time, the last job he had, he said, I don't want to do the job because someone said they will do the job. But then they made a call next day. They just say, no, you are no longer in your service. I cannot go back to them and say, hey, this is the condition. Maybe he was feeling a little bit bad, But then he started his own job after that, but he worked on that for 6 months. Then this COVID thing came. I don't know what happened. He just stopped, but, and he didn't take medication also. He didn't have any COVID, but the time frame, maybe it is all environment, I don't know. But whatever it is. But I think what I'm saying is, the government, the public policy should enable people to get back to the work. As you mentioned in your statement, work is very important for people with disabilities like this. Otherwise they lose the reality. They're happy. All of us will be happy if we don't know how to do any work, but then there are some times that we need to do our work, right, until we are 65 or whatever, 55, whatever age it is, right? So we keep talking to him, but I hope there will be enough support to get them into the job that they were doing or something. But whenever we go to the job fair, they say, oh, there is a job like a chef or something like that, but they are not prepared for that kind of job right away, because they are bigger goals in their life, and they got hit at the age of 25, 26, where something happened in their life, and they're not willing to, although he worked, for 6 months, with similar to the laws, but he didn't like that because people are asking too many questions. So, he's not used to that environment, but I don't know. But all I'm asking is, as an advocate, you should probably bring this, how to get them back to the job market, right? Job market is very important for them. It doesn't have to be whole year, it doesn't have to be long, but at least a part-time job, or some kind of, as you mentioned, David did that, voluntary organization thing, right? But the voluntary should be something they like, that we need to provide that environment for them to, I mean, it has to be done in a higher level, that's what I'm saying. I mean, people who can communicate this very well to the public, to the public officials, like, senators and, congressmen and everybody, who can really contribute to this, to understand that, and then, help them out, I'm sure, as you mentioned also, I mean, many of these people can have a very wonderful job in their life, I mean, 6-figure salary they can make, because of their own education, their own.
Subramaniam, I think I might want to move to the next question. I'm sorry
Okay,
about
sorry.
that. So, because we're kind of restricted on time, so I might want to.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Just let me comment on what he said, and to say that there's different pathways back into the job market. One of the difficult things that David faced was when he wanted to seek a job after his volunteer work. He tried to put together a resume, and there's that big question about years out of the labor force, and how do you explain it? You just don't. So one pathway is through volunteer work, part-time work, but another pathway that David took is through self-employment. And a lot of the people that we talk to with mental illness have found that self-employment provides them the flexibility to deal with any residual symptoms that they are experiencing, or to deal with their functional limitations in a way that they couldn't if they had a regular job. So self-employment's another pathway. But Ravina, you wanted to go on to the next.
Okay, good. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have some more. Oops. Okay, Peter.
Hi, Peter. You have to unmute.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Yes, hello. I just had a brief question. I was wondering if your son had gone through the bankruptcy proceedings because of his financial difficulties.
Yes. Yes, he did. And when he, like I said, he was running up credit card bills and so forth. One thing we did do was put his car in his father's name so that it wouldn't be part of the bankruptcy proceedings. And, I didn't feel guilty about it because we had tried to intervene. We tried everything we knew of to intervene, and nobody would assist. And so eventually the problem came back into our lap. And so we didn't feel guilty about keeping the car and going through the bankruptcy. So yes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Okay, I think we have Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Marjorie. I just really wanted to thank you for everything. This has been amazing and really timely for me as I am going through reasonable accommodations with my employer that I've been with for 4 years, but I've been on leave for about 6 months now. And so they unfortunately, my doctor disclosed my yeah, basically it was an accident. Disclosed my mental illness, and so it has not been an easy process, and they're making me interview for a role. So I have a lot going on right now, and I've been employed in my career for 15 years, so it's been a lot of frustration. And I had an episode, which is why I went on leave, and I had been stable for a long time, but during the pandemic, I think a lot of people have experienced a lot of challenges, and that happened for me. So just to kind of come out of that, and then now have to deal with fighting for a new role has been a challenge. So I really appreciate the information, and it just kind of the validation that the confidence that I have right now to know that, this is my right, to go back to work, and to, if I'm experiencing stigma, that, it shouldn't be there. It is there, but it is my right to be, find employment at the level that, that I have experienced, basically. So I really want to thank you.
Yes, it is your right. And I like that you said reasonable accommodations, because that's the exact language of the Americans with Disabilities Act. So, you know your rights, and you're making your employer aware that you know your rights. Let me give you a couple other resources. One is the Job Accommodations Network, JAN. And
oh, great. I've been looking at it a bunch as I've been firing back emails to them. So that's great.
Yes. So they are very helpful. They work with employers, they work with individuals with disabilities. And so they can help you know how to advocate for yourself. And then, of course, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, they administer the ADA. And if you need to go into mediation or whatever, they can help you mediate with your employer.
That is awesome.
You are well within your rights, and it's important. So good luck to you.
Thank you, Marjorie.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thanks.
Okay. Oops. Okay, so I have some other questions. Before I go to some questions, I think there has been a lot of comments about how inspiring your story has been, and it's given them hope, and they're really, really grateful for you to share your story, and a lot of good luck for the future. Let's see. There's a question here. I see. I have a friend who has heroin addiction since he was 16. I was wondering if he has SMI. He's now 27. He's in prison, and he has been arrested more and being in problems lately. Is it possible he has addiction because there is SMI beneath? How can the family help him to know if for sure he suffers from SMI?
So can you read that part again about why he thinks it might be SMI as opposed to just problems with the substance abuse?
He's 27, he's in prison now, and he has been arrested more and being in problems lately. Is it possible he has addiction because there is SMI beneath? How can the family help him to know if he suffers from SMI?
Okay, this is a little bit out of my area of expertise. I do know that a lot of people with a serious mental illness will actually take drugs or alcohol trying to self-medicate, but I don't think I've heard of that being heroin. So I am more inclined to think that it's probably not serious mental illness, but I am not really the one to diagnose that. And I don't know what the family can do if there are mental health services within the prison system that he could be seen and evaluated to see if in fact there's something more than the drug use going on. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
And I'm sorry for our a person who that this is happening to his friend.
Yeah. There's a question about any advice on how to get proper diagnosis based on your experience. It seems very difficult in my daughter's case, so it's difficult to tell if the correct medication is prescribed.
Okay, well, first of all, you want to make sure that you're seeing a psychiatrist, not a psychologist. You might see a psychologist for counseling, for you or for the person with mental illness, but it's a psychiatrist who needs to prescribe the drugs. Try to get recommendations. Look online at these websites where they rate your doctor. If you know someone who has experienced mental illness, ask them for recommendations. Another thing to do is to seek out a university. Many university hospitals have researchers. That's where David was treated, at a university hospital, and he actually was part of a clinical trial. And so if you look through for a university hospital and someone who's actively doing research, you're probably going to get somebody who's well aware of just the latest research, the best practices. And then there are guidelines put out for best practices in treating people with mental illness. And Rabina, I can look up this and let you know what the resource is, and what agency puts those out. But if you contacted that agency, they might be able to tell you how best to find a doctor.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks so much. That's about it, I think, with the questions. So I believe you answered a lot of them. I think they were really good questions, and thank you for answering all of them. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much, Professor Balvin, for coming tonight and joining us, and sharing your story and giving hope to so many people who have joined us today. Really, really grateful for you to do that. So thank you again. And
thank you for the opportunity.
Out where you are in Texas. So have a good night, and thank you everyone else for joining us tonight. And we won't be having a general meeting in December, so it's the last general meeting for this year. We will see you in January again. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ravina.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye everyone. I think some people are asking me how they can access the recording. It's on our YouTube channel. So if you go on YouTube and you look for NAMI Santa Clara County, you should be able to get all our previous as well as this current general meeting recording. Thank you. Bye, everyone.